It's been 3 long years since my last complete movie collection video. Now sit back and relax as I talk about each and every single one of my movies and why they're special to me. Hey there guys, it's that time once again where I talk about every single movie in my collection, new or old, good or bad. It doesn't matter, it's a good time nevertheless, so go grab something cold to drink, something salty to eat, and let's talk about some movies. I hope you don't have anywhere to be anytime soon because this is going to be a very long video, but hopefully it's fun. And before we dive into the movies, and because I'm poor, I wanted to let you know that this video is sponsored by FanHome. FanHome is a pop culture subscription service that sends you unique collections and build-up models from your favorite franchises, movies, TV, and gaming. Each month in the mail, you'll receive a new part where you can build something like this. You get to follow the footsteps of master film prop designers and assemble a movie-accurate, half-size replica of the most famous astromech in the galaxy. And this is my current build of the R2-D2 droid thus far. It's 100% movie accurate and officially licensed by Disney. Once this current build is done, it's going to be out of this galaxy, no pun intended, but here's just a few features it's going to have. Yeah, hang on. This little droid has cameras, microphones, sophisticated logic boards, powerful motors. After assembly, you can control R2-D2 with a smartphone or a tablet. You can control movement such as his head or retractable arms, project images of Princess Leia or Luke Skywalker, record videos and take photos, activate hidden pop-up lightsaber, but wait, there's more. And did I mention the rotating metal dome with a built-in camera? Once assembly is complete, this little droid will be the friend I wish I always had. In addition to the parts to build each month, you also get exclusive mini magazines. And with the magazines and the step-by-step instructions, it makes assembly super easy. Plus pictures help, I like pictures. Plus you'll receive other cool items like R2-D2 mugs, notebooks, Star Wars caps, and prints. And FanHome has other officially licensed packages like Marvel's Iron Man. Click the link down below to sign up for FanHome and use my promo code FlickPick to get the earlier bird special. Yeah, the links are down below. Don't call me a mindless philosopher, you overweight glob of grease! Once again, big thanks to FanHome for sponsoring this video. Okay, I hope you have some popcorn and nothing better to do. Let's just dive into it and start with this right here. This is the Columbia Classics Volume 1 collection with tons of great movies in here. I'll set that aside though for now. The next one up is going to be the Clint Eastwood collection. I've had this for a very long time. There's a lot of great Clint Eastwood films in here, my favorite being Gran Torino, and I've noticed as I've gotten older, I'm turning into old man Clint Eastwood. I'm just bitter and I hate when people walk across my lawn. The next one is Apollo 13. Mrs. Doubtfire, when you look at the core of this movie for what it really is, it's a father who loves his children, but also he goes about seeing them in the most creepy possible way he ever could, which would take years of psychiatric therapy to overcome such a dark, tragic event in my life. If my father dressed up like a lady and I didn't know it was him just to babysit me, I might have some issues growing up, and maybe that explains what's wrong with me. The next one is Jeff Goldblum turning into a fly and puking on his food. Do I need to say more? Phenomenal movie. The next one up is Youth and Revolt. Next up, This Is It, Don't Get Scared. Now, when it comes to Home Alone, I've always enjoyed this movie, maybe more than I should, but ever since I was a kid, I've always had weird, dark, morbid thoughts about this film. For example, I always imagined my parents leaving me alone at home, forgetting I ever existed, then 2 dudes try to break in our house, but it's okay because I have Christmas ornaments, paint cans, and micro machine cars to keep me safe. Unfortunately, in reality, none of those things work. The intruders kill me, leave my corpse on the floor to find for my parents when they come home. But nevertheless, I really enjoy Home Alone 1 and 2, and I actually find myself rewatching Part 2, Lost in New York, more than the first one. I don't think it's a better movie, but I really enjoy watching it, except for the pigeon lady. She sort of grosses me out. Next up is True Romance, phenomenal movie, and this is an amazing release from Arrow Video. Comes with a poster, all kinds of awesome artwork. Universal Soldier, Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. Next up is The Northman. I enjoyed this film. I was hoping it would go a little bit bigger in scope than it did, but a good time nevertheless. I like time period epic films. Next up, Beverly Hills Cop. Oh, Dream a Little Dream, starring the 2 Coreys. I've actually never watched all of this. I've been meaning to watch this since I was a kid in 1995, and I still oddly have not got around to it yet, but I own it on Blu-ray, so life is good. Next up is Dazed and Confused, one of the best hangout movies of all time. I've always been envious of people who grew up in the late 70s. It just seemed like a fun time where you could hang out with Matthew McConaughey and cruise the streets throwing bowling balls through people's back windows. I don't know. That's what I latch on to. Next up is Dare Hunter, great film about Vietnam. Mud, Matthew McConaughey, speaking of. Goodfellas, one of my favorite Scorsese films, but not my favorite Scorsese film at the same time. I probably reserve that for Taxi Driver, which is right here. Speaking of Taxi Driver, this overall is probably my favorite 1970s film. I relate to this. The character of Travis Bickle, his internal thought process as he drives around the streets, I relate to what he's going through in life. I know that sounds sort of dark and seedy, but it's true. Next up is John Wick 2, Leon the Professional. One of the go-to summertime movies, one of the best coming-of-age films ever made, The Sandlot. I just wish I had enough friends to play baseball somewhere like they do in this movie. I sort of actually found myself relating to the character of Scotty more than anyone else because I don't really have much athletic ability. So when it comes to baseball, I'd probably just get hit in the face with the baseball and hope to make friends out of it. Sicario, phenomenal. Popeye, starring Robin Williams, which is a really weird, bizarre movie. If you've never watched this, it's just odd. It's the oddest movie that's ever existed, but I'm really jealous of his forearm muscles right there. Next up, Roadhouse, starring Patrick Swayze. And growing up, Patrick Swayze in my house was like another version of Jesus Christ. We worshipped this man as an actor and as a human being. But when it comes to the movie Roadhouse, it's the most bizarre movie ever made. And I love some of the quotes in it. Pain don't hurt, thought you'd be a lot bigger. And with all that said, the concept alone, they paid this guy thousands of dollars a night to be a bouncer in some bar in the middle of nowhere, that everything got destroyed every night. He wasn't very good at his job because fights always broke out every 12 seconds. So really, the concept's baffling and bizarre, but a great over-the-top cheesy movie to watch. Fight Club, Talladega Nights. I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew, old man, and I'll scissor kick you. Deadpool. Next up is Over the Top. The title says it all. This is one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies of all time. But I almost put it on another level than just being a guilty pleasure movie. To me, the true core of this film is a father and son relationship, and they're trying to come back together and reunite. But they don't go through the court system. There's no legal battles over custody. No. They solve all of their problems in this movie with a simple arm wrestling tournament. If only life could be so simple. And I know the Blu-ray is hiding in this pile of movies somewhere. We'll find it eventually. Next up is the Stephen King collection. Tons of great movies in here like Pet Sematary. You have The Stand. You have Dead Zone, which I've never seen, Dead Zone. Ooh, next up, one of my top 10 movies of all time, Point Break. It's not about the money, man. It was about us against the system, showing that the human spirit is still alive while everyone else inches down the freeway in their metal coffins. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this movie stars Gary Busey, and I don't feel like I need to say anything else. Great movie. Next up is Wall Street. Then we have Ocean's 13. Next up, we have Warrior, a great MMA movie starring Tom Hardy. And this was one of the original motivations for me ever going to the gym, looking at Tom Hardy's amazing trap definition. And with all that said, before we move on, let me do my Nick Nolte impression from this film. Are you ready?
It's a real nice thing what you did for that boy in that tank, Tommy.
I'm sorry, let's keep going. Next up, Vertical Limit. I remember seeing this in theaters. It was an action-packed adrenaline thrill ride. And that's what it is. Go watch Vertical Limit if you've never seen it. It'll make your palms sweaty. It's intense stuff. It's a little bit cheesy, but still nevertheless really good. The first Transformers directed by Michael Bay. Now, it's cool to crap on the Transformers movies because subsequently speaking, every sequel got terrible, but the first one was a good time. I remember watching this in theaters back in '07. The lines were packed, the theater was packed, and I really enjoyed looking at Optimus Prime in all of his glory. Next up, Zack and Miri make a special movie. A nice underrated Kevin Smith comedy in my opinion. Almost Famous. Oh, another one of my top 20 movies of all time. You rude, crude bag of pre-food chew dude, it's Hook. I've always wanted to be one of the Lost Boys and hang out with Rufio. Ever since I was a young, stupid kid, that was my fantasy in life. And unfortunately, we don't get movies like this nowadays, because this was an over-the-top, fantastical movie that had some adult undertones in it, and it was just the culmination of everything. And when I'm feeling a little bit down and depressed in life, I always go to Neverland and watch Hook. So yeah, go suck on a dead dog's wet nose, as they would say. Next up is Creed 2, sort of an underwhelming sequel. Next up, speaking of slightly underwhelming sequels. The Incredibles 2, it's good, not great. The first one's way better. Detective Pikachu. And I have sort of an unpopular opinion when it comes to this film. If Pikachu was voiced by anyone else, except for Ryan Reynolds with his personality and his comedic timing and his shtick, I don't feel like a lot of people would latch onto this movie. I feel like we like it because of Ryan Reynolds, the voice of Pikachu. Just putting it out there. Next up, The Untouchables. Then we have Spider-Man No Way Home. Who's ever heard of this? This little indie film no one talks about. I'm kidding. Lawrence of Arabia, which I've only seen once, and I've never watched the 4K, which I imagine looks beautiful. It's still in the plastic, but this is a great-looking steelbook. I will savor the flavor and eventually watch that again one day. Next up is Hell or High Water in a steelbook. I have multiple copies of this, but it's still in the plastic. But I feel like I have like 2 more copies of Hell or High Water somewhere. But Ben Foster, such an underrated actor. Then we have Bridge in the River Kwai, also still in the plastic and the steelbook. I was trying to seal in the cinematic flavor here, but I have seen this before on Blu-ray, and it's a great looking transfer. Something about 1950s, 1960s films, just the transfers just look beautiful. Everything shot on film, if it's transferred properly, just looks amazing to look at. That's why I'm like not the biggest fan of like digital movies nowadays. Next up is Men in Black, Sugar, Water. And with all that said, where's my drink at? Next up is Split. My name's Hedwig and I want a hot dog. Probably one of M. Night Shyamalan's best films in the last 22 years. Easily probably one of his best films. I would say it's my favorite film of his. Next up is the Creed, the first one. Still in the plastic. I've owned the Blu-ray of this before. I just never got around to watching the 4K. Clearly I bought this during a Black Friday sale. But I love the first Creed. Next up is The Wizard of Oz on 4K. I've always enjoyed this film, and rewatching it again and again, the older I get, the more I look at this film, and it just terrifies me how creepy it truly is. But a great fantastical film, one of my favorite musicals of all time, and just the backstory and the making of this film, if you ever go read anything about it, it sounds like the most horrific experience to ever go through. And I'm hoping one day they make a behind-the-scenes movie of making Wizard of Oz. It's going to be a dark, seedy movie. You just wait. Next up is Braveheart. You can take our land, but you can't take our movies. I think that was a Scottish accent. I'm not quite sure. But that's the steelbook version. V for Vendetta. One of the greatest comic book films ever made. And I remember watching this for the first time in the theater. A friend and I, we skipped school because that's what we did. We went to the theater and watched this. And it was definitely way better than going to school. Next up is E.T., still in the plastic, on 4K. I've owned multiple different versions of E.T. over the years. I've had the DVDs, the Blu-rays, but I have not watched the 4K yet. So, unpopular opinion, I like the movie. I think it's iconic. I think it's phenomenal, but not one of the most rewatchable Spielberg movies, in my opinion. Anybody else? Like, the imagery is iconic. I love it, but not one of my favorite Spielberg movies. It's like I like the idea of E.T. more than I like watching it at times. Maybe I'm all alone in that opinion. Dunkirk. This was one of those movies where I really liked the first time I watched it, and it doesn't have a lot of rewatchability. I'll just leave it there. But looks great. Casino Royale. This is my favorite James Bond movie ever made. I will stand by that. That is a hill I will die on until the day I die on that hill. Nearly perfect in every single way. The 3-act structure of this, it just feels like you're getting 3 phenomenal movies in one. Halloween Kills. Sort of almost killed me when I watched it. And 2018 Halloween. The new one's coming out very soon. Hopefully it's good. Next up is Baby Driver, the 4K steelbook. And just look at the artwork on this. Doesn't it just make you want to watch the movie? And for 1 second here, I want to slow down and tell you guys why I like physical media so much, and then we'll continue on. But when it comes to physical media compared to streaming, there's something about owning the physical copy of this optical disc. This isn't going to go away next week when Netflix decides to get rid of this movie. No, this will always have a nice, safe place on my shelf for whenever I want to go relive the experience of watching it again and again. No one can take this away from me. Well, I mean, technically, I guess you could break in my house, murder me, and then take it away from me. and hopefully that doesn't happen. But the point I'm trying to make is, when it comes to physical media, it's more than just watching the movie. It's living an experience. It's going through all these different emotions, and you can pick any one of these emotions you want off your shelf at any time. If I'm feeling happy, I can watch a certain type of movie. If I'm feeling a little bit down and out, I'll watch another type of movie. But the point is, these are all little emotions that you can put on your shelf and save for a rainy day. And to me, that's why I like physical media so much. Yeah, in a weird psychological, maybe philosophical way, it's like I own all these different emotions and I'm in control of them, and I can pick and choose any one of them I want. That's how I look at physical media. Is it getting weird? Let's just keep going. And the next one up is The Incredible Hulk, which I think is a really truly underrated Marvel film and probably better than 90% of the modern day Marvel movies we're getting. Yeah, sorry if that got a little bit weird and deep, but people always say, John, why don't you just stream your movies? Why do you waste your money and shelf space on physical copies? Because these physical copies are what movies are about. They're about experience. It's not about just consuming content. It's about feeling something. And if you guys want to feel something, go watch Dread, truly underrated comic book movie. Next one up is Halloween, probably one of my favorite Halloween slasher films of all time. I love the way it looks, the simplicity of it, and I'll watch that again in a few more days. X-Men Dark Phoenix. Don't ask why I own this. I'm sort of a completist. That's all I'll say. This is a bad, shitty movie, but I own it. Tenet. I don't care what anyone says. If you like this movie, that's great. I wanted to like it. I thought I would like it, and I have tried since watching it for the first time in theaters to go back and revisit this probably 5 more times, and I always get halfway through it and I can never continue on. It got a little too self-indulgent. Star Trek Beyond, probably my least favorite of the Star Trek new trilogy. I know people like that. I prefer the first one, directed by J.J. Abrams. Oh God, here it is. Okay, I didn't want to get too serious once again, but we have to stop, and I have to explain something to you if you're watching this right now. When it comes to physical, optical media, don't ever buy this 4K release of T2 Judgment Day. This is in fact in my top 5 movies of all time. I think this is the best action movie ever made, so I hold it to a very high standard. When it comes to T2 Judgment Day on 4K, it's not a very good transfer. It sort of got all the soul sucked out of it. They took all of the grain, they changed the color grading. It just looks sort of flat and dull and lifeless at times. I can't recommend buying this. Just the little tweaks and changes ruined this for me, so I would actually stick with the Blu-ray. Now, I'm a weirdo, and I'm crazy. That's why I own the 4K Steelbook, which I think looks, like the Steelbook looks good. The transfer of the movie, not so much. Next up is Home Alone, the 4K, which looks good. Next up is the Star Trek Original 4 Movie Collection. This is still in the plastic. The only one of these I have seen is Wrath of Khan, so I'll save these for a rainy day. Get ready to sweep the leg, sensei. Next up is the Karate Kid trilogy. I've only seen the third Karate Kid once in my life, and I remember the first time I watched it, I thought it was like a knockoff movie. I was like, no, this looks too cheap to be a Karate Kid movie. No Time to Die. Oh, well, hey man, there's a beverage here. You want a tow? I can get you a tow by 2 o'clock with paint. One of the best comedy movies of all time. This movie speaks to me, and I relate to the dude maybe more than I should. One day I will be him. I will just wear a bathrobe around town and not give a shit. I'm already halfway there. Next up is The Never-Ending Story. Great fantastical movie coming to America. And speaking of Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop on 4K. I already showed you the Blu-ray, which I probably don't need any longer. Next up, Avengers Endgame. I like Avengers Endgame. I was happy with it. I think it was a conclusion that was fulfilling. Next up, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And when it comes to Quentin Tarantino, this man is not afraid to make the movies and the art he wants to make, and that's why he's one of my favorite directors working today. You know he's not gonna just bow down to corporate studios and take out things out of his script to appease the masses. This man's not afraid to offend people, and that's why I appreciate him. But when it comes to this film, I actually enjoy it the more I watch it. The first time I saw it in theaters, I enjoyed it. I liked it. But upon rewatch, especially on 4K, I've grown to love this movie. The characters of Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton are a few of my favorite buddy friends in movies maybe ever. Next up is Avengers Infinity War. Hey, what are you doing down there? Hey, come here! That's my Beetlejuice impression. I need to watch this around the Halloween time. Next up, Collateral, probably one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies ever made, and probably one of my favorite Michael Mann movies ever made, right beside Heat. This is, in my opinion, kind of an underrated movie, not enough people talk about, and this is one of my favorite Tom Cruise performances he's ever given. Watching Tom Cruise play a villain, I actually enjoy more. It feels less disingenuous, if you will. Yeah, I think Tom Cruise makes a better villain. I'm just putting it out there. Glass, which was sort of a letdown. More or less, the final 20 minutes of this movie were atrocious, but the rest of it was okay, but Split was by far the better movie. Uncut Gems, a movie I've only watched once. Do I think I'll watch the Blu-ray anytime soon? I'm not quite sure. It's just a really unsettling movie that gives me anxiety. So if you want to feel those things, watch Uncut Gems. Oh, Blade. They just don't make them like they used to. Talk about a comic book movie in the 1990s that got it right. It did everything just right, and if only modern day comic book films could follow this same formula. It's rated R. It didn't hold back. And in my ways, I think this still holds up to today. I'm hoping the new Blade movie's good, but I've heard some bad things about it thus far. Raging Bull. Tron Legacy, I love the visuals of this movie, the soundtrack, just the way it looks. This is a great demo quality Blu-ray. I don't own the 4K. Is the 4K out of this? If it is, I need to get it, but I don't own it. Then we have 48 Hours. Then we have Skyfall. Then we have Peter Pan. The Nice Guys. Hey, I know, you got Rocky what? The Rocky Undisputed Collection. This is the Blu-ray. Then we have The Lighthouse. There's nothing better than Willem Dafoe farting in black and white, but this is a great time. I remember watching this in a theater with 7 other people at a press screening, and it was just such an immersive experience watching the movie in 4:3 aspect ratio. I really enjoyed it. Christmas Vacation, one of the best Christmas time comedy movies ever made. Evil Dead. I Am Legend. The Hangover, which is a comedy movie I really have grown to dislike. I remember when this came out back in 2009 or 10, this was the talk of the town, but now it's just, I never get the urge to ever revisit this. Am I the only one? Wall-E! There was something so interesting and relaxing about watching this little robot pick up trash in the first act of the movie. And call me crazy, I didn't need him to go on an adventure in space. I could have watched an entire movie about that little robot stuck on planet Earth just picking up trash. To me, that would be truly relaxing. Next up, X-Men Days of Future Past. Arguably the best X-Men movie ever made, or at least for me it probably is. Thus far. Then we have Rogue One. Okay, let's go to this pile here. Then we have Dawn of the Dead, really underrated Zack Snyder flick and a great zombie movie. Recommend watching this remake. Then we have Escape from New York, one of my favorite John Carpenter movies ever made. This and Halloween are probably my favorite. Just the concept of this movie, just one dude stuck in a situation who has to get out of it. The score, that synthy sounding score, just so immersive. Next up is Scott Pilgrim. Lethal Weapon Collection. Warriors come out to play, yeah. Pay for what? One of my favorite 70s films of all time. For many years, they tried to do a remake of this, which kind of scared me, but I was sort of looking forward to. But yeah, if you've never seen The Warriors, highly recommend it. It's about a group of gang members trying to get home. But these aren't just ordinary gangs. No. There's one gang that dresses up like baseball players and they paint their faces. Phenomenal stuff. If I was ever going to join a gang, I would join the Baseball Furies. Am I good at baseball? No. But would I want to dress up like a baseball player and paint my face like a clown? Yes, I would. The next one up is Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. And still to this day, the best Pirates of the Caribbean movie ever made. Next up is Michael Mann's Heat, one of my favorite heist movies ever made. Then we have Whiplash. I never thought watching someone play jazz could be so intense, but the finale of this movie, it's just a dude playing the drums and he's sweating and it's it puts you on the edge of your seat. When I watch Miles Teller play the drums in this movie, it makes my palms sweaty. This is such an effective movie, and I love J.K. Simmons' character in this film. I like assholes in movies. Call me crazy. Next up, speaking of Miles Teller, is War Dogs. Then we have Big Trouble in Little China. Next up, one of my go-to comedy movies of all time. Growing up in the mid-1990s, I would watch this on HBO at least 3 times a day. Whenever it was on, I would stop and watch Tommy Boy. So when it comes to my most watched comedy movies ever made, I would say Tommy Boy is probably up there. Then we have Kill Bill. Oddly enough, not one of my favorite Tarantino movies. Then we have Sword in the Stone, a truly, truly underrated Disney classic animated movie. I love the story of this with Merlin the Wizard. Good stuff. Then we have Gravity. Then we have Gangs of New York. Then we have Step Brothers. Then we have The Prestige, one of my favorite Nolan movies ever made. And I'm hoping Nolan goes back to more simple style movies like The Prestige. Then we have The Fast and the Furious. Do you guys remember when they were just stealing VCRs and racing cars down the street? Now they're superheroes hacking into the Pentagon, trying to disarm bombs, and they might go into outer space at some point. Who would have ever thought? Oh, here it is. Oh, over the top on Blu-ray. We've already talked about this extensively, so we'll move on. Then going into the Halloween season, we have The Addams Family and Addams Family 2. I remember seeing both of these in the theater. Good time. Reminds me of simple times as a child. Then we have Pulp Fiction, probably in my top 2 or 3 Tarantino movies ever made. Then we have 1917, Psycho. Then we have Magic Mike. I'm a dude. I'm comfortable with who I am. If I want to watch Channing Tatum dance covered in baby oil, that's my choice. And in 2022, you can't judge me. But I like Magic Mike. For me, this was just like a fun movie. Like I like the character of Magic Mike. Matthew McConaughey in this movie is phenomenal. So yeah, I own Magic Mike. Then we have Equilibrium, another underrated sci-fi movie with Christian Bale. Then we have Shaun of the Dead, The Steelbook, Alice in Wonderland, and then we have Armageddon, a Michael Bay movie, and some might hate this movie, but I call this a guilty pleasure movie. And a fun quick backstory about this. I remember as a kid, I went to see this at the theater by myself. My mom drove me to the theater, dropped me off, and I was stupid for some reason that day. I went to the wrong screening of the movie, and I sat in an auditorium that was empty for an hour before it started, just thinking it was 10 minutes, but I waited there for an hour as it played in another theater. And then halfway through this film, I remember the manager of the theater coming by with a flashlight saying, "Hey, is your name John?" I was like, "Yeah." Apparently, my mom thought I was kidnapped because I was in the wrong theater. I only got to see half of this movie, and I had to wait till the VHS came out to finish the rest of it because I couldn't pay attention to the showtimes on the marquee. So that's my story about Armageddon. Let's keep going. Speaking of guilty pleasures, Van Helsing. I think this is a fun, unadulterated, good time to watch around the Halloween season. And it's a little bit hokey, it's bad, but I like watching Hugh Jackman fight giant monsters and vampires. It's a guilty pleasure, but I'll stand by it and recommend you watch it at least once. Four Brothers, Wayne's World. I love this film and I relate to it. I've always enjoyed it, but being a dude who makes YouTube videos and at one point making YouTube videos in my parents' basement is very reminiscent to Wayne's World because they had a public access show where they filmed it in their parents' basement. So in a weird way, I felt like I was living the modern day version of this at one point. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, one of my favorite spaghetti westerns ever made. Why do I own this? I don't know. Oh, don't you know, he was a big fella. One of my favorite Coen Brothers movies of all time and a dark comedy, Fargo. Then we have The Sixth Sense. Then we have Monsters, Inc. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a great high school movie that has some really dark tones to it if you really break down some of the subplots or storylines in this movie, but other times it's just over the top and comedic. And I want more movies like this nowadays, but too many people would probably be offended by this movie because it touches on a lot of different subject matters, but that's why it's a timeless classic. Roger Rabbit, The Island, truly underrated Michael Bay flick. The Mummy, I love me some Mummy. Then you have Batman The Dark Knight Returns Deluxe Edition. Trainspotting, a movie that made me never want to do drugs. Aladdin, the Steelbook, and just look at that Steelbook. Isn't that beautiful? When it comes to Aladdin, it's probably my favorite classic Disney animated movie of all time. And I actually remember watching this in theaters in 1992. Yeah, it's just little weird things like that stick with you when you're a kid. Then we have A Bug's Life, The Golden Child, The Day After Tomorrow, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. This is not a very good movie, but let me explain myself for 1 second. I remember before this came out, I was sort of hyped to see it because I liked the first Transformers movie. But the day this came out, I actually was working, and the day before I put in a medical request to go to a doctor's appointment. So I only had to work a half day, and I skipped work to go see this. I should have just stayed at work. Die Hard 2, American Reunion, Cars, Inglourious Bastards, District 9, Toy Story 3, a movie that will make any grown man cry. And those final scenes where Andy's playing with his toys, oh, talk about almost having a midlife crisis the more I think about that. This movie just, it gives you the feels. It would have been a perfect conclusion to the Toy Story trilogy, but then they had to make the fourth movie. Then you have The Kingsman. Then you have the John Hughes collection. You have Ferris Bueller, 16 Candles, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I mean, I love 99% of John Hughes movies. Next up is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And I want to briefly talk about this film and my love for it. Not a lot of people have watched this movie, and not a lot of people love this movie, but I'm the opposite. I think this is a great time period epic adventure film, and I'm a sucker for movies like that, and I wish we got more movies like that. But yeah, when it comes to this movie, Kevin Costner doesn't even attempt to do an English accent because he simply cannot, which I guess doesn't help the movie, but I still love it. Next up is Event Horizon. Then we have Cabin in the Woods, The Accountant, Master and Commander. Oh, this is my top 20 of all time. And once again, another time period adventure film. But unlike Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, this feels somewhat historically accurate. And if you've never watched Master and Commander and you want a truly immersive experience in a very well-made film, please watch this at some point in your life. I cannot recommend this enough. And yeah, they need to put this on 4K very soon. Then we have Trading Places. I hope Freddy Krueger comes and cuts your head off and it rolls into the street and a truck drives over it. I gotta go poo. The Fanatic. Wolverine. Then we have Aquaman. Oh, another one of my top 20 movies of all time. It's Stand By Me. I've always connected with this as a kid, and I always wanted friends like the friends in this film. This never gets old. I can rewatch this movie probably 5 times a year, and it always takes me to my happy place. But at the very end of the movie, it reminds me that life is very fragile and it doesn't last forever. And it makes me reminisce about my life and almost makes me have a midlife crisis when I watch it nowadays. But I still really enjoy it. Next up is Sicario, Day of Soldado, and an okay sequel. John Wick 3, Lock Up, a nice 1980s Stallone movie. Super 8. Some people love this. The third act of this movie, I just was sort of taken out of it. Then you have Black Panther. And real quick, if you think this is all the movies I have left, no. I couldn't fit them all on the shelf, so I have more back there on this shelf that we're going to dive into in just 1 second. Actually, let me get them now. Okay. Just when you thought it was almost over. No. The madness has just begun. Speaking of madness, we have Cape Fear, Gone in 60 Seconds, Winners Go Home and Fuck the Prom Queen. I love Me the Rock. I think it's the best pure Michael Bay movie ever made. 101 Dalmatians, a movie about a crazy evil lady wanting to kill puppies. Sort of a very dark concept. The Italian Job, Walking Tall. We have Training Day. Oh, Troy. You sack of wine. Once again, when it comes to epic time period films, this is right up my alley, and I want more movies like this made. Drive. The first time I saw Drive, I didn't know how to like digest the movie. It wasn't what I was expecting. But then I went back and bought the Blu-ray once it came out, and I've loved it ever since. Just the visuals, the cinematography, the tone, the music, the opening getaway scene, just gives me everything I want. Beauty and the Beast, Swordfish, Backdraft, Deliverance is another movie that makes me never want to go camping. Okay, here it is. And I'm still waiting for this to hit 4K, but Nightcrawler. I mean this when I say it. The name of the company is Video Production News, a professional news gathering service. That is how it should be read, and that is how it should be said. When it comes to Nightcrawler, it is my favorite movie of all time. If you could go into my brain and take a concept or a story that I've always wanted to see, it would have been Nightcrawler. Like, if I could make a movie and have an $8 million budget, I would want to make something identical to Nightcrawler. It speaks to me. So with all that said, steady hands, steady hands. The next up is Sleeping Beauty. Then we have Hardball. Then we have Ant-Man. Then we have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And speaking of lobotomies, I feel like I need one right now. Then we have How to Train Your Dragon. Snow White. Yeah, I went through a weird phase where I felt like I had to collect every classic Disney movie, because one day when I was going to go to a dark place, I was like, I need all these happy-go-lucky Disney movies. That way, when I have my midlife crisis, I can lock myself in a room and relive all my happy thoughts in one. That's why I own so many Disney movies. And speaking of Disney movies, I have Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Wait. Why were those stuck together? I don't know, but I don't have to explain myself to you. Then we have Wedding Crashers. Then we have Casino. I like Casino. If I had to compare Casino to Goodfellas as like gangster mob movies, I prefer Casino. I think it's the more entertaining film. Just putting it out there. Then we have Die Hard with a Vengeance. I actually prefer Die Hard with a Vengeance over the first Die Hard movie. I know, unpopular opinions, but I like the buddy team up of John McClane and Zeus, Sam L. Jackson. Then we have Top Gun, the Steelbook, Beavis and Butthead Do America, Real Steel, which is sort of like the modern day equivalent remake of Over the Top. Basically the same concept, except you have robots fighting and not arm wrestling. Oh, Django Unchained. Arguably, probably my favorite Tarantino movie ever. I love this. And I've watched it probably 80 times. I like the time period. I like the journey that they go on. I like the story of retribution. So many great things in this. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Weird Science. I remember being a kid, I had a friend stay the night over and we watched this. And we tried to put Barbie dolls in a microwave to bring them to life. Sort of eerily similar to what they do in this movie, except it didn't work out exactly the same way. My friend's dad got really pissed at us because the house smelled like burning plastic. Next up is Transformers Dark of the Moon. And then we have Avatar. I know the cool thing to do is talk about how irrelevant Avatar is and how it had no impact and how it's not original or blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I like watching 9-foot-tall blue alien people fly dragons and make love under the tree of life. I don't need to explain anything else. I like Avatar. It's a visually stunning movie to look at, and it's pure escapism. There, I said it. Next up is Last Action Hero, a film that was ahead of its time, in my opinion. There's a lot of great things about this movie. If you're into movies or going to see movies, I feel like you should watch this. It's almost meta. But with all that, I remember vividly, I would go stay with my dad on the weekends because my parents had split custody. And me and my dad would always go see movies at a local theater. And this was one of them. And it just brings back so many great memories. So yeah, Last Action Hero. The next one up is The Lost Boys, the movie Seven. What's in the box? Then we have Breakdown with Kurt Russell. I almost said Russell Crowe. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. Not a very good movie, but sort of a guilty pleasure. Like, I'd much rather watch Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift than Fast and Furious Part 8, 9, or 23, whichever movie they're on now. Toy Story 4, we've sort of talked about that earlier. Next up is Bad Lieutenant starring Nicolas Cage. This is one of the best theater experiences I've ever had in my entire life, and let me explain what I'm talking about. I went to an art house theater to watch this. Now, I understand the dark humor of Nicolas Cage, but all of the senior citizens in this art house theater watching this movie, they just thought it was a straightforward drama film. So when I was hysterically laughing like I'm utterly insane during the comedic moments, or at least what I assumed were the comedic moments of Nicolas Cage, everyone was looking at me like I was a big piece of shit and they wanted me to leave. Funniest movie I've ever watched. Good Will Hunting, Kick-Ass 2, Footloose. I love the scene where he dances in the warehouse. Inside Man. October Sky, which has probably been in the plastic on Blu-ray for like 5 years. One day I will open this bad boy up and watch it, but I've seen the movie multiple times. Zombieland, Daylight, 300, Camp Nowhere. I remember seeing this in theaters as a kid. The Long Kiss Goodnight, Ender's Game, which I'll probably never watch again. The original Spider-Man trilogy. Ooh, The Ring. I love me The Ring. And I remember watching this in theaters. Now, it's still in the plastic. I know, but I've seen it many, many times. I still vividly remember watching that creepy little girl crawl out of the well when I was watching this in the theater, and my skin was crawling. You could just feel the electricity in the air watching this in the theater. Matchstick Men, great Nicolas Cage movie. Blow. Then we have Aliens. Blade Runner. This is the 30th anniversary edition. Then we have 21 Jump Street. Surprisingly really good comedy. I remember liking this quite a bit. Then you have 22 Jump Street, which the sequel was not as good. King Kong, directed by Peter Jackson. If I ever go back and rewatch this, I always find myself skipping over the first 25 minutes of the movie and just getting into the good stuff and the momentum picks up. The only thing that takes me out of this movie is the last line that Jack Black gives, where he's like, "It was beauty that killed the bees." It's like, The Fifth Element, Corbin Dallas, the Karate Kid remake starring Jaden Smith. The thing that makes me keep this movie is the fact that Jackie Chan's in it, and I really like Jackie Chan. The Mummy Returns. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna talk about more movies. Then we have Cliffhanger. Then we have Die Hard, Minority Report, Platoon, Alien 3, the sequel to Magic Mike. I don't need to explain myself to you. It was sent to me for review purposes. Jarhead, great underrated movie. Friday the 13th on Steelbook. The Jungle Book. Live Free, Die Hard. Ladybug, starring Rodney Dangerfield, where he makes his teenage stepson dress up like a girl to play soccer so they can win. American Beauty, starring the guy who we can no longer talk about because he was sort of canceled, but I love me some American Beauty. When he's working out naked in his garage having a midlife crisis, one day I will probably be there. The Disaster Artist, Big Hero 6, The Usual Suspects. Oh, the best video game movie ever made, and I stand by that. I don't care what you say. Mortal Kombat 1995 is still the best video game movie ever made. With all of its shortcomings, with all of its cheesiness, phenomenal soundtrack, not afraid to do what it wants to do. I like it. Quantum of Solace, Prometheus, great concept. Some of the execution I wasn't a big fan of. Robin Hood, Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow, whatever you want to call this movie. I still call it a good time, really enjoy it. The Scorpion King. Okay, let's talk about this right here. The Man of Steel 10 case. Love me some Man of Steel. I know not a lot of people love it. I like it, always have, always will. It's not perfect, I know, but that's still a really cool release. Then we have Gone Girl. Just a huge pile of movies stacking up beside me right here. Green Hornet, which I really don't want to own this anymore. Like I went back and tried to rewatch this again. It's just not very good. Then we have Dinosaur. I'll never probably watch this again. Con Air. I don't need to say anything else other than put the bunny back in the box. Oh, Waterworld. I love me some Waterworld. The thing I really enjoy about this film is it opens up with Kevin Costner drinking his own piss. Now let me continue on. I like post-apocalyptic movies, and this is that. Yeah, it's a little bit hokey and over the top, but so many iconic moments. Paper! If you haven't seen the movie, I sound crazy, but go watch it. Rome in the Bronx. I remember watching this in theaters. Jackie Chan. Juno. Cinderella Man. The Hateful Eight. Now, I know when it comes to this film, a lot of people would say it doesn't have strong rewatchability and it's not one of their favorite Tarantino movies. But for me, it's the exact opposite of all that. I would say it's in my top 3 or 4 Tarantino movies, and I have probably revisited this movie at least 20 times. And when it comes to films that take place in one location, I find it so immersive to watch. I just find every single performance in this film so compelling, and I'm glued to the screen whenever this is on. So I love me some Hateful Eight. I could watch this movie multiple times a year. The next one up is Edward Scissorhands. Then we have Finding Nemo, Ghostbusters, RoboCop. This movie made me want to eat baby food. Next up is Toy Story 2, Soul, Mean Girls, still in the plastic, but I like the pink Blu-ray case. Thor, the dark shit. Snow White, Doctor Strange, American History X, Iron Man 3, which was sort of a disappointment. Probably overall my favorite war film ever made, Saving Private Ryan. Another Michael Bay flick, Pain and Gain. Hey, I gotta get a pump. I wouldn't say I really like this movie, but I like things about it. I just wish those things were in a better movie. Like, I like the aspect of working out and Mark Wahlberg and it being a dark comedy, but I think if another director had handled this, it would have been a superior movie. Then we have the X-Men trilogy on Blu-ray, which this is like falling apart. Welcome to prime time! That's my terrible Freddy Krueger impression, but yeah, we have the Nightmare on Elm Street collection right here. Then we have this. Full Metal Jacket. I have Fast 5, this ugly Blu-ray case that's the size of a DVD case, not a Blu-ray case, which I hate how tall this is. Then we have the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Then we have the Hobbit trilogy, still in the plastic, and it'll probably stay there for the remainder of my life. Then we have Blade Runner 2049. Then we have Joker, a deep dive into madness. And I love films about psychological trauma. I'm drawn to them. And this reminds me a lot of other classic films like Taxi Driver. But yeah, Joker. Hope the sequel's good. Then we have Alien. Then we have Alien Covenant. When it comes to a demo quality 4K optical disc, if you had to light up all the pixels on your TV, I would recommend watching this. This is probably one of my favorite action films of the last decade. If not, arguably speaking, probably one of the greatest. I would stand by that. But yeah, Mad Max Fury Road, the more I watched this movie, the more I liked it. Okay, next up, let's cover this one right here. It's the Columbia Classics 4K Ultra HD Collection Volume 2. Volume 3 is coming out very soon, but tons of great movies in here like Taxi Driver on 4K, Stripes, The Social Network's in there, but yeah, some great movies in there. The only thing I don't like about these is I don't like the size of it. It's like the size of a board game. I wish it was more the shape of a box so I could put it on my shelf and it didn't take up so much space, but beggars can't be choosers. Next up is Godzilla vs. Kong. I know some people liked this. This was sent to me for a review copy. I don't know if I'd ever go back and rewatch this again. Next up is Clockwork Orange, a movie that you should watch at least once if you're a fan of cinema, but a really unsettling movie to watch. So you don't really get along, you don't get around the family and say, hey, let's watch a Clockwork Orange. But the one movie you can watch with the family is Goonies. Then we have The Invisible Man, Onward, Space Jam, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I would probably say this is my favorite musical of all time. And plus, there's something so intriguing and so fascinating about the Oompa Loompas in this movie. I've always wanted to run a company and only hire Oompa Loompas. I will pay them. I'm just saying, like, something about that, I've always wanted that. Do you think that's legal? I don't know. Let's keep going. Next up is 310 to Yuma, great Western film. The Dark Knight Rises, a movie I've watched probably 100 plus times, but I will say in my later years, there's a lot of blatantly obvious issues with this film, and I notice those more and more the more and more I watch it, which is sort of unfortunate. I still consider this a masterpiece, but when it comes to the Dark Knight trilogy, you can just tell this was the one that had the least amount of love and care given to it. Next up is Batman Returns, and I actually like Batman Returns, the sequel, more than the original Batman. I know, call me crazy, but when it comes to Returns, I feel like Danny DeVito's Penguin is so underrated. He's a sick, sadistic child murderer who kidnaps kids and wants to show people his French flipper trick. But I still love both of them, but yeah, I sort of prefer Returns a little bit more. And then, speaking of Batman movies, we have The Batman. Then we have The Dark Knight. I mean, what more can I say about this film? I probably have seen this more than any other movie in my life. Next up is Batman Begins. You guys know I like Batman more than I probably should. But let me give you a quick backstory about how this movie inspired me. Not to be a vigilante, but to be a YouTuber who talks about movies. Now, I've always enjoyed movies. Since I was a stupid little kid, I've always loved cinema. But something about watching Batman Begins in cinemas back in 2005, it reignited or sparked a new love of cinema. And I started looking at movies a completely different way than I ever have. And that's more or less why I make YouTube videos, because Batman Begins inspired me. So thanks, Batman. Next up, and no thanks to you, fuck you, Justice League. And also we have Batman and Robin, which I'm glad this exists, because if this didn't exist, we wouldn't have gotten good Batman movies like Batman Begins. So in a weird way, ice to see you. And let's keep going. Next up is Zack Snyder's Justice League. I liked it. I just don't think it has that rewatchability I was hoping it would, but way better than the Justice League. Then we have Batman v Superman. And I hyped this movie up 2 years before it came out. I made like 87 YouTube videos dedicated to talking about this. And when it came to Batman v Superman, I think there was a lot of missed opportunity there. This could have easily been the best comic book movie ever made, the ultimate showdown. And what we got was mildly entertaining at times, but the narrative was just a complete mess. Okay, now it's time to talk about some Star Wars. First up, we have The Phantom Menace. Say what you will about this movie, and Jar Jar Binks, I know, but this movie will always have a special place in my heart because it's the first Star Wars film I ever saw at the theater. Plus, Darth Maul was a badass. Duel of the Fates playing during the climax of the film. Oh, some good stuff. Then you have Return of the Jedi. Then we have Revenge of the Sith. Fun story about this. I remember going to the midnight showing of this. That's a time when society only got midnight showings. You had to go there at midnight on Thursday to watch movies before anyone else, except there was a long line of people waiting to see this. And I found a group of my friends in the line, and tickets were all sold out. So I went up and down the line offering people $50 for their ticket to watch Revenge of the Sith on the midnight showing. And somebody did sell me their tickets. So I paid $50 to watch this. Was that a good investment? I don't know, but hey, it's a great memory. Next up, we have Attack of the Clones, easily my least favorite Star Wars movie ever made, outside of Rise of Skywalker. Then we have Star Wars A New Hope. Then we have Empire Strikes Back. Fly, Pelican, Fly. Scarface. I love me some Scarface. I like how this film is such like a time capsule back into the early 1980s of Miami. I just like the visuals. I like the atmosphere. We have Interstellar, Man of Steel on 4K. We have Thor on 4K, Civil War, Captain America, the first Avenger. I think the first Captain America is a little bit underrated. Just putting it out there. Then we have Captain America, the Winter Soldier, Avengers Age of Ultron, X-Men First Class, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Hey y'all, I'm Mary Poppins. Then we have Iron Man, the movie that started it all. I wish we could go back to things so simplistic in the MCU like Iron Man was. Then we had the first Avengers. And I just went back and rewatched this again for like the 28th time a few weeks ago. I like this movie. It's just pure, unadulterated fun. Then we have Deadpool 2, X-Men Apocalypse, sort of a letdown. Then we have the first Scream, perfection, like the perfect meta horror film. Then we have the classic Jaws. And by the way, if you guys didn't know this about me, if you haven't watched my second channel with John Flickinger, I showed a quick vlog video of my bathroom that I'm working on right now. It's going to be a Jaws themed bathroom that also has toilet paper holders that are sharks. That's what I do. Okay, let's keep going. Next up is Castaway, a truly remarkable film that always has hit home with me. And I find myself rewatching a lot of films most people could only watch once in life, but something about the time period where Tom Hanks' character is alone on this island and he's isolated from society. I like that. I find it so relaxing to watch this film. It's almost like sitting on a beach, listening to the waves come in. To me, it's relaxing to watch. I like that there's no dialogue. I enjoy that he's talking to an inanimate object for the majority of the film. I like things like that. And speaking of talking to inanimate objects, I'm talking to a video camera right now, and I'm all alone in a room. So that's why I relate to Castaway. Next up is Superbad. Probably in my top 10 comedy movies of all time. This movie is almost an accurate depiction of my life in high school. This is eerily similar to me and my best friend, except we weren't as nerdy as they were, but we were just as fucked up. Next up is Apocalypse Now. Great looking steelbook. Oh, Parasite, one of my favorite movies of 2019, and I'm so glad this won Best Picture of 2019 because it was utterly and truly deserved. Just a movie that's twists and turns, and I want more films like this. That's why I love some South Korean movies, because they're the ones taking chances and making great cinema. Next up, Boys in the Hood. I love me some Boys in the Hood. Next up is Gladiator, easily in my top 10 movies of all time. And once again, I've said this once, I'll say it again. I love epic time period films. And with all that said, my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a dead son, husband to a dead wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. I'm paraphrasing. It's getting late. Next up is Thor Ragnarok. I will probably never buy Thor Love and Thunder, just putting it out there. Shutter Island. Another Top Gun 4K steelbook. I think I own multiple copies of Top Gun. Don't ask why. Oh gosh, American Psycho. If ever I could relate to a film, it's American Psycho. I don't want to go any deeper than that, but I need to return some videotapes. Next up, oh my god, it even has a watermark. It's Knives Out. Then we have Luca, the new Mortal Kombat film, which I think was sort of a letdown. I much prefer the 95 movie. A Quiet Place. And then we have The Quiet Place Part 2. Then we have Kick-Ass, the steelbook. When it came to Kick-Ass back in 2010, I saw this movie in theaters probably 5 times. I loved it. I still love it to this day. Then we have Addams Family, the 4K. Then we have Sonic on 4K. Wolf of Wall Street, a great modern day, not even modern day really. This movie's like 10 years old now. But when it comes to Wolf of Wall Street, directed by Scorsese, it just shows how much vitality he has as a director. He was almost 70 years old when he directed this, but you would never know that. And I love this. Wonder Woman, War of the Worlds, the first It film, Mission Impossible 6 movie collection. I like the majority of the Mission Impossible films. I think if I had to pick, I think Fallout and Ghost Protocol are my 2 favorites. Oh, 1.21 gigawatts! Next up, Indiana Jones collection. Then we have Shrek. Next up is Forrest Gump. This at one point was my favorite movie of all time because it just felt like the most well-rounded movie ever made. And what I mean by that is, it sort of feels like you're getting 28 different movies in one, but I like every single movie I'm getting. It has the comedic aspect, it has the drama, it has the fun, it has the levity, it has like dark tones of humor. And as a wise man once said, life's like a stack of Blu-rays, you never know what you're going to get. And speaking of that, I don't know what I'm going to get. Ooh, Independence Day. I remember watching this in theaters back in 1996. eating a big bucket of popcorn. Next up is Ghost. Then we have the Matrix Reloaded, Matrix. Blah, blah, blah. I don't like the Matrix sequels. Hereditary. Mad Max trilogy. Oh, Lord Humongous. If everything goes to shit in society, what I'm going to do is shave my head, put on a chrome Jason Voorhees hockey mask, lather myself up in baby oil, and cruise the wastelands, calling myself Flickmungus, and I'll talk like this. Leave the fuel and I will spare your lives. Next up is Waiting. If you've ever worked in the food service industry, and I did at one point deliver pizzas, this movie's very relatable and a truly underrated comedy movie. iRobot, The Rundown, which is, I would say, the best rock movie ever made. Then we have the Godfather trilogy. Then we have some bootleg copies of the Star Wars trilogy, but these are the fan edits, like the pure fan edits where they took different sources all over the place to give you the actual real version of what Star Wars was before it was tampered with. So yeah, that's these. Next up, we have Star Trek Into Darkness, F9, The Fast Saga. I think I watched 12 minutes of this and I was like, I'm done. Then we have the first Matrix, phenomenal. What more can you say? Then you have the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, sort of a guilty pleasure, like some good ideas, some good concepts in this movie. Then we have Requiem for a Dream, another movie that made me never want to do drugs. Then we have Ghostbusters Afterlife, La La Land, and the reason I like this movie so much, well, okay, I don't really love this movie, but I like it, is because I went to the Zurich Film Festival in Zurich, Switzerland, and saw the premiere of this, and it was just a really cool thing to be a part of, and it's just a nice, vivid memory. And like I said, movies are memories that you put on your shelf. So this, in a way, is a memory I put on my shelf. Next up is Star Wars: The Last. Then we have Escape from L.A. Not a very good sequel, but sort of a guilty pleasure. Then we have Looper. Then we have Shooter. Then we have The Wrestler. Phenomenal movie. I love that because I'm a sort of a wrestling nerd. So yeah, that's a great movie. Then we have Don John. And in many ways, at least when this movie came out, I really related to this in many ways. But yeah, it's still a great comedy movie. But the thing I most remember about watching this in the theater was during the opening credits, they're showing a lot of clips from a little thing called Cornhub. And I remember multiple people getting up and leaving the theater. Then we have Predator. Do it now, I'm here, kill me. What's the matter, pushing too many pencils? Next up is Too Fast, Too Furious. Then we have Galaxy Quest, Inception, which I've seen probably one too many times. And then we have Silence of the Lambs, this movie won like 5 awards the year it came out, including Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor, Best Screenplay, and it deserved every single one of these. This is a film, and I'm going to try to not sound so much like a sociopath when I describe my love for this, but ever since the mid-90s, watching this movie as a kid, I've always been drawn to it. And I think the thing that really draws me to this film is it terrifies me, because unlike other supernatural horror films like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, the tormentor in this film, the antagonist in this film, these types of people actually exist in reality, which is terrifying to me. You never know who's going to come up to you, and then you end up down in their well in their basement. So with all that said, it puts the lotion in the basket. Next up is Old School. Then we have the Mummy trilogy. Then we have the Planet of the Apes trilogy. I still really enjoy that first Planet of the Apes movie with James Franco. Then we have the 5-movie collection of Jurassic World. I will always love the first film. I remember seeing the first film in theaters as a kid, but here's the thing. I was so young when I watched the first movie, and I think I was feeling whiny, or maybe I was sick the day we went to the theater to see this. I remember crying like a stupid little whiny bitch during the Velociraptor scene in the kitchen. And because I was crying, my dad took me out in the lobby, and I missed the majority of the film. And for some reason, I feel so guilty about that ever since 1993. But yeah, great movies. Well, the majority of those are great movies. Then we have The Gremlins on Steelbook. And then the last movie in my collection is Shang-Chi. All right, we did it, guys. Once again, we have completed an entire movie collection video, and I've said this once and I'll say it again. These types of videos take years off my life. I enjoy making them once every 2 to 3 years, and I know you guys enjoy watching them once every 2 to 3 years. But most importantly, it's fun to go down memory alley and recall all these great memories with these movies. But nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Now here's my question for you, and let me know down below. Share some of your favorite movie memories from some of the movies I held up in this video. Share as many as you want. Leave the longest comment ever. I love reading that shit. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. That way, I can see you next time. And now I'm going to pick up everything.